And to be honest, I mean, I didn't know they were here, and when it's like the song, and so I hopped on the internet and started doing some Google search and just think, I mean, we're in the middle of a series. Actually, it's the fourth week. We wrap up next week, talking about friending. And so I love how God has a sense of humor, because that's really the message this morning. And probably we could sing that song a couple more times and just say it's a day. But let's push into it here a little bit, just to unpack it some more, because something locally I want us to know about. What were the other two verses? What's the words?
The river flowing in my heart, and the river flowing in my mind.
Okay, so it's the soul, heart, and mind. And so those, if you think about, even as we talk about our mission to love God and love others, how do we do that? Well, it comes out of the context of our loving our, in the context of our soul, the context of our heart, and the context of our mind. And that's pretty amazing, if you ask me. So love how God surprises us in that. So thanks for sharing your talents. But like I said, we're in the middle of this series on friending. And I want us to drill down a little bit. 2 weeks ago we talked about the idea of relationships. So what is it really? What is friendships, and why do we need it? Last week we talked about how that we really need friends, and I don't know if you remember, but we talked about there was 3 different kinds of friends that we all need. We need somebody like a Jonathan that speaks into us with our spiritual journey, offers us his strength. There's a friendship like there was between Samuel and David when he called David into ministry, and this idea of calling us out into our vocation, to what God desires for us. And then, remember I shared also, we need that person like Nathan the prophet, who went to David and called David out on his sin with Bathsheba. And so there's people that speak truth in our lives. And so the key point of this whole series, though, has been simply this. If you show me your friends, I will show you your future. And I don't care whether you're a 7th grader or a freshman in college, or you're someone who's on the other side of the journey, celebrating 35 years of marriage and in retirement, that all of us need to think about the people we spend time with. And part of our responsibility as being Christ followers is to find that in the context of doing church together. Because church really isn't the building, it's really the people that occupy it, and more importantly, it's the people who go out into the community, and that's sort of what this morning's conversation is going to be about. And you'll remember this scripture that sort of has been the last 2 weeks, sort of the fundamental is that if we walk with the wise, we what? Become wise. For a companion of fools suffers harm. So if we hang out with wise people, we become wise. If we hang out with those that fools, our character and our integrity just goes right down the tubes. And I don't know about you, but as I've shared, that I can remember, it was my buddies. I won't say, Kevin won't catch this. So Kevin and I were complete knuckleheads in high school. We did lots of stupid stuff. One of the most painful one was, you remember these soapbox derbies over in Ashland? We always had the soapbox derby that went down Center Street there. Well, we built the derby. I built my derby, and we lived up off of Sandusky Street by Brookside Park. Well, if you went over one street over, there's Ellis Street, and it's got this nice downhill that goes into Brookside. And on the soapbox derby, you can only turn the steering wheel just because you really are supposed to go straight, but they allow you to sort of compensate. The steering wheel can actually turn 2 inches, so it's not a lot. But it is a lot if you apply physics, because if you start at the top of the hill and you go all the way down about 250 feet, if you start this way and you pick up momentum, the next thing I know, Kevin and I, up 3/4 of the way down, we're on 2 wheels sideways, kind of having fun, and then we come back and go 2 wheels this way, and then we went off the road and over a manhole cover, and I completely trashed his shin, and I'm sure there's still scars to this day, and I broke my arm, and it was like, yes, so you hang out with people, and we had a lot of fun with that, and the sad part was none of my friends wanted to help me do my paper route later that afternoon, so you can all say, aw, because my mom had to take me up and down Vine and Pleasant Streets to deliver my papers, because nobody believed that I was actually hurt, but go figure. But let's try with this. We're following this journey of some friends that are doing the tryouts for their small group, and just check out this short video here to introduce today.
Guys, I don't know what you all think, but I just don't think he's working out.
No, not a fan,
I know.
I have to say.
I mean, he hasn't even paid our new friend rent in like a month.
He wouldn't let me wear his clothes.
Really?
He looks like a guy that owes me money, so
Right.
I'm just not gonna be able
I
to.
know, and he kind of smells like that dog food factory.
Oh my
You know what I
god,
mean?
like elbow.
I know.
Very bad.
Yeah, I'm just not sure he's friend material. Somebody's gotta break the news.
I'm not doing it.
Really? Yeah, I'm sorry. We're gonna have to unfriend you.
But don't worry, it's not you, it's us.
Thanks, Seth. We appreciate your time.
So, this idea of friendship is like, I don't know about you, but, especially if you've ever seen a movie like Mean Girls, where they sort of figure things out in a very despicable way. But we all want to have friends, and we can see that it's an important way that God has wired us. And last week, the takeaway was simply this, that you may be one friend away from changing the course of your destiny. And then we also leaned to the idea that there are three types of poverty that we experience in the world. There's material poverty, where people actually don't have anything. There's spiritual poverty, where people are broken and disconnected from God. But there's also this thing called relational poverty. And it's amazing because part of the American spirit is this idea of being rugged individualists, right? We just go, America is the one country that we put up fences, walls to keep people out. And the reason we do that is because everyone, like I've shared, when I went to Kenya, all the young people I met, young women and men both, all want to come here because they believe, well, first of all, they all think it looks like New York City, which is like not the case. Drive through downtown Manchester, that's not New York City. Although it's fun to be here, it's a different kind of thing. And so, but they all think that it's about wealth and opportunity and power and presence. But see, really, for us as Christians, the idea is that there is this, I want to suggest that idea of being rugged individualist is actually non-Christian, a non-Christian idea. That God really wants us to be dependent upon Him. And again, this is a plug for the men's study on Thursdays. We're leaning into this book Leviticus, and we've sort of started Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and I would encourage you, if you can get away at noon on Thursday, to come join us, because it's just been an interesting look at even the idea of the Ten Commandments. As we looked at the book of Deuteronomy, or Exodus rather, as God gave the Ten Commandments to Moses, the first thing that happens after they get the Big Ten, the first thing that happens is that the writer, probably Moses, unpacks what that looks like in relationship to slaves. Which is just really interesting because I had, in all my studies and in my journey reading the Bible, I'd never seen that correlation. And it was just extraordinary to see that God was so concerned that the Israelites understood how to treat their neighbor. And so part of the reason why even this conversation on friending, turning it into more of an action word, is really to help us understand the role that we have in the community, in God's economy of understanding that He didn't make us to be by ourselves. And yet, if you think about it, this idea of relational poverty is everywhere. It's everywhere, and it's pervasive, and yet we need to figure out how to wrestle through that. And so I want us to look specifically this morning. If you have your worship notes, get it out, because I want to fill in real quickly what I think are the three reasons why what causes relational poverty. Let me just give you the quick, so you can fill them in. Increased mobility, modern conveniences, and a rise in social media. Now let me unpack that a little bit. I mean, if you think about it, we are the most mobile of societies. I've got my phone here right now because it's telling me that my daughter Sarah, who last Tuesday got an airplane and flew to Dublin, and then actually she flew to, where'd she go first? Chicago? Oh, where? New York, and then over to Dublin, and then she got on another airplane and got from Dublin to Birmingham, England, and she just spent the last 4 days, and is actually on her way home, and will land in Newark, New Jersey, here in about a half hour. And it's extraordinary when you think about that And what's even more extraordinary is that just because she shared her itinerary with me, Google automatically added it to my calendar, and there's a little thing that says United Airlines Flight 26 will arrive at 11:38 a.m. That's amazing. I mean, it's amazing, it's beautiful, but that's created all sorts of problems because I can remember even as a young boy going to the airport with my grandparents because they were going to Europe, and it was a big deal. I mean, Grandpa had on his coat and tie, and they had the, they were flying Pan Am, and I can remember this was a big deal because not everybody got on an airplane and went to Europe. But today it's so easy, so that our daughter can decide to go see her best friend, Berenice, who she met when she was an exchange student. It's been 8 years. And it's been fun through Instagram and Facebook to be able to see that common journey that they've shared, even though they've not been together in 8 years. They actually had dinner at the restaurant that the Butcher to the Queen actually runs. They're there somewhere in Birmingham, and how cool is that? And it's like, there's this beauty in that, but I also want to suggest that it complicates our life because there's so much that comes at us. And then if you even think about how often we move, this is extraordinary. I mean, we've only moved 1, 2, 3 times. 4? Mom and Dad's to the apartment, so 3 times. Yeah, we got married, lived in the house next door to my parents, then moved into an apartment a year later, and then actually moved into the house that we live on East Walnut. We've been there ever since. They say that right now the average American will move 14 times in their lifetime. Now, what's interesting about that is that it's all based upon wealth. So the more wealth you have, the least reluctant you will be to move. The least that you will actually put down roots and stay in a community, which I thought was an interesting correlation. And I know that those of us that work with those in the at-risk community, man, they change their addresses, it seems like, every 2 weeks. I mean, if you think about the ministry that we have through the Pots and Pans, through Love Inc., through this church that Margaret has given amazing leadership to, it just seems like constantly, although it's been a light summer, but it still seems as though there's plenty of evidence to point to the fact that we're an increasingly mobile culture, and there's actually a good thing to that, but I actually want to suggest that that's one of the reasons why there's this relational poverty. Because the other part of it is, I mean, my best memories, even yesterday as I went to celebrate my dad's first cousin who passed away earlier this week, and Jeff lived in Rittman, and so as I drove past out 604 and then finally came out at Bender Road, and Bender Road is actually where the Steiner farm is that I'm not sure how he's related, first cousin twice removed or something, that Matthew operates is actually the farm that his father, that his father, that his father, that his father operated. That's extraordinary when you think about it. And that Matt lives in a newer house that lives on that same property that it has been for generations passed down. And so there's a beauty in that, and even I found myself being nostalgic as I drove down that road, just being reminded that how many times as a young boy we went to my great uncle's farm to swing on the rope and to let the Kathy suck your fingers, because that's what you did, because that was kind of the fun thing to do on the farm, or to climb on the hay mound. All those amazing things that I think our culture today, especially our young people, have missed out on, because people can pack up and move and very easily go live an hour away or 2 hours away or halfway around the world. So there's that piece. The other part is modern conveniences. I mean, think about this. I was saying this earlier. I actually think there's been studies done on this that would prove this, that air conditioning has increased our sense of relational poverty. Because we just don't go outside. We don't engage. I was joking with Linda. It's like, how would your grandmother have dealt with today's heat? Well, she would have dealt with it. But for us, if the air conditioning isn't on, it's like, okay, this is complicated. Or you think about the front porch. Or you think about online shopping and banking. There's all these things that are having an amazing, I mean, I can remember buying my first car. I can remember going to the bank will remain nameless, but I went to the bank and my parents had actually set up an accounting when I was born, had money in it, and my dad wanted me to get a signature loan to buy my first car. And I went to the bank vice president and said, my dad wants me to get this, and they had just gotten bought out by a larger bank, and it's like, you're not allowed to do that anymore. You can't just do a signature loan, you have to do an installment loan. And I called Dad, and Dad said, nope, I want you to have a signature loan, because I want you to show payback, and I don't want an installment, I want you to do it very quickly. And so I walked down to my dad's bank, the business bank and talked to the vice president there, and he said, I'll tell you what, you go back and close your account out in that bank, and I'll have a check ready for you, and you can do exactly what you want to do. Just give me your business. But today we don't have those kinds of relationships, and if you're in the banking industry, you know that it's all about, every time I go into my bank, it's like, if you refer a friend, we'll give you, they got beach balls, and I joke that they would actually be great at doing kids ministry because every quarter they've got a different, theme going on. Right now it's actually sort of a ranching theme, so there's cow spots and, cowboys, and, it's just like, that has nothing to do with what banking was. And even the idea of an attached garage, how attaching our garage to the house has actually impacted things because people you just zip into your garage, hit the garage door, open the garage door, zip in, close it, and then you just stay in your little world. And then at the same time, you think about the phone. I mean, I know this is hard to believe, but there was actually a day that if you wanted to know who was on the phone, you had to answer it, right? I mean, today, the phone rings like it just did here, and it says, oh yeah, I don't want to take this call. I'll just, they'll leave it on voicemail, and it's like, see, that's part of this problem is that we've pushed off. Now, it makes our lives convenient. At the same time, I think it has impacted how we relate to each other as human beings. And then, in a more particularized way, because of the online presence, and I'm the first one to love to leverage it like we were this morning. It's like, Barry's going to offer us a new song, and so I want to grab the lyrics because I think songs are important, and I want to know the history behind it. And so with a couple of keystrokes, it's like, wow, that's amazing. And it's amazing it's in our space that we can create that. But yet it's also something that creates relational poverty. And then finally, it's the rise in social media, which has sort of been, and it's actually, it's interesting if you would Google this, as I did this week in preparation, there is what they're calling deferred loneliness. There's this huge epidemic that Atlantic is talking about, all the major magazines, Inc., Fortune, the Wall Street Business Review. I mean, these folks are all talking about the fact that we are living in the most loneliest of times, which I don't understand. Because I could very easily, right here, do a live broadcast conversation on YouTube with our daughter's friend Bernice, who's in a home in Birmingham, England. It's like, that's amazing, but yet, for us as a church, we have to figure out how do we, together, corporately, lean into, because it's not that something is missing, as we talked about, which we talked about as friendship, or that someone is missing, but it's actually a group of someones. That actually the idea of being community with each other is really, really important. And so the first point this morning, and really the key point for today, is that you are one community away from changing the course of your destiny. And I just want to go to this telling of out of the book of Acts, chapter 2, of what the church was supposed to be. Jesus has resurrected, he's ascended to heaven, and now the disciples are gathering together, and the book of Acts is this amazing story telling of just what began to happen. And here's what it looked like for them. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone in need, who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts. And it's like, that's what fellowship is supposed to be like. But yet, somehow in the life of the church, corporately, individually, we've gotten so far from that. And I get it, because if you go back and look at these things that have sort of created the sense of poverty of relationship, it comes from the fact that we're just all too blasted busy. We're all too engaged in certain things. And life, even though life is easier, life is harder in some regards because we have to be intentional about creating relationships. And so this morning I just want to give us 3 ideas and have a conversation with some friends to talk about what that might look like in our community, just as one example. But let me pray first. Father, we're grateful for the fact that you are a relational God. We're grateful for the fact that you proved it yourself as we study the great stories of the Old Testament. It all pointed forward to Jesus coming in the flesh, to moving into our neighborhood, literally there in Jerusalem, Bethlehem and then Jerusalem and the Middle East there so many years ago. And yet today we benefit from that, and we look as people of the way back to that story. And so this morning I pray your Holy Spirit would take these words and take our conversations and encourage us to understand what it is that you're calling each of us to do. And that what doing together, individually, we can do together to leverage the kingdom for your benefit and for our growth and our own journey of becoming more faithful and loving you and all that we're about. So we just thank you in your most precious name, Jesus. Amen. This will be sort of weird, but I was going back to the idea of when I was living with some guys, and even after Melinda and I first got married. So let me just thinking about that context. What are the three qualities of great communities? Well, the first one is this, is that we have refrigerator rights. Now, what do you suppose I mean by that? I know it'd be a little odd if I showed up at Betsy and Dick's house and walked in the front door, just made myself at home, went to the refrigerator, maybe not, opened the door, and it's just like, you won't believe what Pastor Tom did. It's really weird. He just started going to the refrigerator, he got out the bread, mayonnaise, I hope it's Miracle Whip, and made a sandwich, and just helped himself. And it's like, yet at the same time, when I was hanging out with my best friends and we were really leaning into this faith journey in a whole new, fresh way, we had that kind of relationship. We actually had this house called the Red House that Melinda and I eventually moved into. But we even had in the Red House, it was crazy, it was this old house that my parents allowed me to restore, and it wasn't really much, it was just a concrete block building. But there was a window, actually there wasn't a window, but one day we decided, the kitchen's on one side and the living room is on the other. But there's just one doorway, so let's put a hole in the wall. So we took the sledgehammer and we literally busted in and put in, so it was big enough. We actually had a pizza box. We made sure that a large pizza box could be conveniently passed through, so it made life easy for these college students that I was hanging out with. Because you see, the scripture tells us this, is that all the believers were together and had everything in common. Now it can be weird, but that's the kind of thing that we need. That's the kind of relational piece that we need. And we need to risk that. And that can be complicated because, as some of our adults know, when you invite youth into your home, it looks different. Whether it's your own or your kid's own or it's our youth group. It's like, and we want to begin creating those opportunities again in the fall as we launch into loving our students. The other thing is that the second part is that we all have flawed feet. My feet are not the prettiest feet. My toes are sort of gnarled, and so I tend to, when I'm in somebody else's house, I don't have my flip-flops on. I'll tend to have shoes because I don't want to be disrespectful. But I just think that's a great analogy that we just need to allow each other to have flawed feet. That the idea of actually showing who we are as opposed to who we want them to think we are. And even to some degree, they risk to have crippled feet that just to help us understand that we're all broken. They all together in this room, no matter where life has led us, is that we all have a common understanding is that we need the cross. We need Jesus off the cross, out of the resurrection in heaven to rescue us. That's what we all share, is that none of us can attain heaven without that. And so I like to say that at the foot of the cross, it's level. No matter what our brokenness is, no matter what our needs are, no matter what it is that we stand in desire of, is that we all share that fact that we're broken. And yet we all struggle with materialism, we struggle with maybe neglected families, but all that. But it's interesting here, this obscure story here in 2 Samuel. I can't even say this guy's name. And anybody want to take a stab at it? This guy lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table, and he was lame in both feet. Now that's just an obscure little verse that we could, no different than just saying, well, it was just coincidence of singing the song this morning. But I just thought it was interesting that the king invited this man who was lame in both feet to come and to share at his table, which is something I think is really, really important for us to see. That we all have struggles, and yet it's at the king's table that we want to be a part of. So where I want to go this morning is I want to end up on this idea is that we all fight lions. That there's this element, and the reason I want to do that is because there's a couple writings in Scripture where we need to be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. And that's our journey, that's our story. And So one element I want to do, because I don't know if any of you saw the News Journal yesterday, but Ted Daniels is a good friend, who's the editor, is now leaning into a conversation in our community and leading it through not only the printed version, but the News Journal's webpage to talk about this opiate epidemic that is just destroying our communities. I was, again, at my family's celebration yesterday, and even outside of Youngstown, Rittman, we were talking about, this is extraordinary with some teachers, of what's going on in the schools and how the kids are finding these synthetic drugs, and how I want to suggest that because of the relational poverty that's there, because of the fact that of social media, and I want to tie these things together, that we, not only this church, but the church universal, has to figure out how to address it. And so this morning I want to invite two good friends, Stan and Valerie, to come and join me. And so would you welcome them, Stan and Valerie Russ? Stan and Valerie are the founders of a ministry called the Starfish Project, and so they're trying to lean into this, and so I just thought it would be fun. We've had a number of conversations of how do we're sitting together as part of the Mies Academy, trying to learn how to be non-profit. But I heard both of them share their story at a clergy appreciation dinner that the Ruritans, who I didn't know the Ruritans were still around until last year, but it was kind of fun. But I want to just welcome you, and maybe you could share a little bit how this came together.
Well, we had been touched by addiction. Our son was an addict. And I cry ugly, so I apologize. He was in a good school. He was an athlete. He was not what you would conventionally think of as someone who would become drug addicted. He was church most of his life. And yet, when he was 15 and a half, we got a call from the police in Ontario that they had picked him up and he had been running from them all night, and that he was hiding something and they didn't know what. And that culminated in him turning 19 in prison with an F1 felony conviction for breaking into someone's house, and it was basically an assault charge, but it all was in conjunction with his drug abuse. He went to prison for a 3-year sentence. He was shocked out in 6 months, which means they released him on community control, which is probation essentially. He was failing on probation. We had kicked him out of our house because we were watching him die in front of us, and we decided that he couldn't die in our house. And so he was in the pay-to-stay jail, which is the old people's hospital on Park Avenue East, if you haven't been there. Hopefully you haven't. But he called one day and he said, I don't know what's wrong with me, but if something doesn't change, I don't see a future for myself. And so we took that into prayer at our church on a Sunday. On Tuesday, he called me and said, have you ever heard of this thing called Teen Challenge? And I said, well, no, personally I haven't, but it sounds better than where you are now. Teen Challenge is a faith-based, 12 to 18 months residential treatment facility that's been around a little over 50 years. And if any of you are old enough to remember the old Cross and the Switchblade story, it's essentially David Wilkerson's ministry that started in New York City and then branched out across the country and is now an international organization. So he arranged the whole thing himself, paid for it himself, because he was still, even though he was an addict, or what people would call an addict, he was able to maintain a job throughout the entire portion of his addiction. So he paid for it. The night before he was supposed to go, he called me and he said, I think I'm going to run and just go back to prison because this is going to be too hard. And I said, well, you know, Jess, you've been church most of your life, and I believe that Satan knows if you go, he's lost you. So he's going to push you really hard. So when I got in the car that morning, I had no idea if he was going to be there to go into the program. So I put his things in the car where I was meeting his probation officer, and he was going to take him into the Teen Challenge program. And on the way there was, I listened to Mansfield Christian Radio, and there was a song on it. It was the first time I heard it. It was by a group called Russian Fools, and the song was called Undo. And the chorus was, Lord, you're the only one who can undo what I've become. And I told Jess, this is God's message for you. That you made a mess of this, but it's fixable, but he's the only one that can do that. So he cried, I cried, the P.O. snippled, and Jess turned around to walk to the car. And he stopped about halfway to the car, and he turned around, and he laid his cigarettes in my hand. He said, I don't need these anymore either. And I had the opportunity to watch God get a hold of his heart again. And within 2 weeks, he had recommitted himself to Jesus Christ and had been baptized in the program. Shortly thereafter, he called us and said, I've been recalled into the ministry. I had no idea he'd ever been called into the ministry, but apparently God had called him at 17 and he told him no. So that didn't pan out so well, did it? Telling God no is never a good idea. But he went through the program, graduated. He was graduated in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, which is the second phase of Teen Challenge. He went into their aftercare program, which took him to High Ridge, Missouri. Went through, worked on site at the Teen Challenge program. He's now sober 10 years and is a pastor in St. Louis. So that's what we started with. And God started telling me I was a starfish mom. I had no idea what he was talking about. And probably about 5 years into Jesse's sobriety, or maybe a little less than that, we started getting calls from people saying, we know your son lived through this, what did you do? So we were essentially helping individuals get connected with the Teen Challenge program. Then we found out that there was a pastor in Shelby, Tom Snyder, and actually Sheriff Sheldon here in Richland County that had been trying to start a Starfish Project to mirror the Starfish Project in Huron County that pays for treatment options for people when they want to go into Teen Challenge. So we met with them. We asked them what they needed to get started, and they said people. I said, how many do you need? And he said, I don't know. How many can you get? I said, I don't know, but let's find out. So the first meeting, we got about 50 people. We now have an active board of about 9 people, including Sheriff Sheldon, who's remained on the board and is very committed to this as well. And so we've been doing it almost 4 years now.
Maybe Stan, can you talk about, unpack the idea of the starfish?
Yeah, the Starfish Project, the whole idea, I don't know if you know the starfish story, but there's a young man walking along the beach and there's all these starfish laying on the beach, and he's picking them up one at a time and throwing them in, and the older gentleman sees him and says, what are you doing? He says, well, the tide's gone out, these starfish are going to die. I've got to get them back in the water. He said, there's thousands of them here. You're not going to make a difference. And he picks up one, he throws it in the water, and he says, I made a difference for that one. So one at a time, God sends people to us, and this is God's plan, this is not our plan. He directs us, He guides us, and we try to save them one at a time. Now, they don't always want our help. They want to talk to us, they don't go, oh, no. Usually in some form or fashion, we hear from them later, either that they passed on, or that they changed their mind, or something like that. But that's our goal, just as God sends to us. We try to direct them, and we primarily like Teen Challenge because it's faith-based. It's basically a Bible boot camp. You're in the Word. You're working. You have a regime, a day that's scheduled for you. But we don't just stick with that. That's not suited for everybody. There's other faith-based ministries, and we'll send them there.
What are some practical things that we could do as a faith community to make a difference, to help you, but also in our own community with the awareness? I mean, there's a couple of dates coming up we want to talk about.
Right. We have 2 awareness events. They're also fundraisers for Starfish Project. The first one is August the 31st, and it's on the Brickyard in Mansfield, which is the area where they have the Final Fridays, if you've been down there. And that is, it's 40. I lost my words here. The young lady that actually organized that lost her brother to a heroin overdose in 2011. And she was the organizer of one of the first International Overdose Awareness Days in Ohio in 2012, and I had the opportunity to speak at that event with her. And now that she's graduated college, she organized this event. And the purpose of that is to just kind of destigmatize for the families of the individuals struggling, and give them an opportunity to come forward if they have lost someone to addiction, and recognize that that person did pass on. However, that through the awareness of this, that maybe their life can have a purpose. And also for people who are still struggling, to give them an opportunity to connect with some community resources that will be available there as well. The second event is on September the 10th, and that's the third event that we've organized annually, called Richland Redemption. The purpose of that is to bring together a broad spectrum of community organizations that provide support services for families and those struggling with addiction as well. We have about 20 organizations that are scheduled to be there. Representative Romanchuk and Senator Ophoff are our keynote speakers, and then Sheriff Sheldon and Police Chief Coons are going to be speaking. Dale Powers and some of his friends are going to be providing the music for that event. We also have free food because one of the things we're trying to do by moving the event to the square and outside of a brick and mortar is encourage individuals that may not step forward to ask for help if they have to come into a building or a church or something to ask for help, trying to encourage them to come to a common area where they can talk to people that have resources there for them. Just, you know, the big thing is isolation. Even though when you talk about community, the addicted community is a community in and of itself. It's a little subsection of society that operates in itself. That being said, there's still a huge stigma and shame associated with that, especially for the families who have people struggling. We have a family support group that meets at 6:30 on Monday nights at Mosaic Church, and the outpouring of these people's hearts often is that sense of isolation and shame. And even though they're terrified for their loved one, they don't feel that they can talk about it. You know, I read somewhere that nobody brings casseroles when your child's addicted. People don't know what to do to support. And I think the big thing that we feel, having been parents of someone who is struggling, is to just be there and listen. Because a lot of times what they're processing is frightening, it's embarrassing, but they need to say it out loud. They need to have somebody they can share that with. We really believe that that's, you know, outreach is important, and having someone to talk to and to walk that with them is critical. Not everybody can deal with that. I might talk to you.
No, you're fine.
You would have something? Okay.
And also right across the hall from where we have our meeting, there's a 12-Step for Jesus, which is run by a Graduate of Teen Challenge for people who are addicts that need help and continuing help. Teen Challenge is a fantastic privately funded program throughout the country. A lot of churches support them. We try to get, we're 501c3, so we fundraise, try to send people that. And it's amazing, depending on the facility we send, and whether we're sending a male or female pregnant or not, the cost for an entire 12 to 14 months is $500 to $1,000. That's residential. They're there the whole time. They're in study. That's all we pay. The rest is covered by private institutions and churches that support these teen challenges. And our son, when he was in Perry, Ohio, at the Teen Challenge, the second day he was there, they had 3 buildings. Their laundry, kitchen, and schoolroom building burned to the ground. He was there the second day. The 4th day he was there, a semi pulled up with a military camp kitchen donated by private organizations. It's just overwhelming, the amount of support that these organizations get through churches. And if you want to volunteer, we're on Facebook. We're going to leave brochures here. If you want to donate, anything you can do. And just mainly take our brochures. If you know anyone that needs our help, have them call us.
How about, what time on the 31st? That's Wednesday,
The 31st is at 7 p.m.
at the Brickyard.
At the Brickyard, and then the September 10th event will be from 1 to 5 on the square in Mansfield, down by the gazebo area.
Okay, all right. So just want to lay it out there. I mean, and the other thing is we need to be praying for your ministry, but this addiction, I mean, back to this scripture, and I guess, this one from 1 Peter, be alert and then sober mind, your enemy, the devil prowls. I mean, whether the story of your son or and I've heard as we've talked, I mean, you're on the phone with somebody and the head trash that's going on to convince them, no, I can't do it, that really the devil wants to eat them like a lion.
Right, and you know, I really appreciate the song that was on the screen earlier, telling me that I'm somebody. A lot of these people don't have, it's like there's been a damage to them in some capacity, whether it's a physical damage that put them on pain medication that then they became addicted to. A lot of the women, probably 90% of the women that we talk to were sexually molested in some capacity. A lot of them are involved in human trafficking. The damage to these people is substantial. And they need to be told that they're worth something.
Okay. They respond to that too when we talk to people who have just not had a good life and they're addicted, and we tell them, we love you, Jesus loved you. And even though we don't have the sin of addiction. Your sin is no worse than our sin. We still have sin. And we've had people, they get quite emotional that they're hearing they're worse.
Well, let's pray. We pray for you guys. Father, thank you for Valerie and Stan, for the places you've called them. Thank you that we can hear their story this morning, and we just pray with them and stand with them and offer our strength against, and just pray, Jesus, the power of your Holy Spirit to push back the darkness. We thank you that you are the light. We thank you for the fact that what you've done through their own brokenness, and in those moments as they were dealing with Jesse, I know this isn't what they saw, but how out of their brokenness you are rising up a movement, and they're part of that, and we want to be part of that too, to actually take back that which has been lost to the evil one, to establish the boundaries of the kingdom, whether it's in this neighborhood or the city of Mansfield or even larger, so that the gospel is presented, that lives are changed, that wholeness comes to people, they find their place in your story, and that together we worship you and we offer that to the world that's just so much in need. And so we thank you and just pray your blessings upon every step that they take, literally, from this point forward. Pray your blessing upon Wednesday evening for the Awareness Day and for the Redemption event on the 10th, that you would be present in that, and that those that need to hear would be encouraged to risk, and that they would risk to know the saving power of you. We just thank you in your most precious name. And all God's people said, amen. Would you thank them? Now, I just want to end with this because I think this is extraordinary, because we do think that lions take us out. I don't know if any of you saw this, and this is just, I want you to see the power of community. So in this video, it's not the best, but if you see the tree there to the right a little bit, down below that is actually a water buffalo. That it's a crazy video if you watch the whole thing, but I can't watch this stuff, so I have too soft a heart for animals. But this water buffalo was in the water, and the lions grab it and bring it out on shore, and they're going to devour it. But before the lions can get it on shore, there's actually an alligator that's got the back punches of this water buffalo. So this water buffalo is toast. It's like he was having a bad day when the alligator got him, but then the lions got him. Now, what I want you to see is the power of community, because these water buffalo, this herd of water buffalo that normally are lunch meat for lions, I want you to see what they do. This is extraordinary. You can see a couple of them are going, okay, this is not looking good for us, the lions. And a couple of the more risky water buffalo are like, you know what? And you can't really see that there is still a little baby water buffalo in the midst of that pack of that lion's den. And so some of them go away. And how much is this like? Then one of them decides, you know what? I'm done. And he goes after the lion. And then he goes off screen again. And he actually chases this thing. And then he comes back. And I just think this is such a great analogy of what we have to be as the kingdom, is that there is messiness in our life and people are getting taken out in our very community, maybe even our own neighborhoods. And we have to be willing to risk to stand together, to pray together, to encourage each other. And you'll see here in just a second, they decide to just lean into it as a herd. And they, look at that. I mean, this is crazy. And they chase it, and then all of a sudden, see, it's the power of one, and all of a sudden, the whole community. This lion is toast. You can't see him, but he's hurting. But look at this. This is crazy. One water buffalo. And then you come back over here, and you see the video, and the lions are realizing it's now gone from 10 of them down to 4 or 5, and you can sort of see the baby is still trying to get out, and then finally, these guys make another sort of lead in. I'm not quite sure, but this again, I just think this is an amazing story of how our lives are played out. And if some of us would take the risk. See, they rescue the baby, and now these lions are going, okay, what are we going to do here? Our lunch is gone. It's just a couple of us, and then if you play it on out, it's like, this is crazy. It's called the Battle of Kruger if you want to watch the whole thing. But you see, independently we are vulnerable, but when we lean in it together, there is an amazing power. And so finally this scripture out of John. Everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. You see, it takes time, it takes intentionality. We need to serve together. So those of you that are in kids ministry or would desire to be part of that, tonight we're gathering at 5 o'clock because we're launching the ministry back here after Labor Day. I mean, it takes intentionality. And so as our response, let us, the song I want us to lean into is to be reminded that God's salvation is coming. And it is a tide that is coming in to rescue those that need to. And so as you feel led, you can remain seated. Let these words speak to you.